So do you like the notion of sitting face-to-face with an IRS agent, maybe trying to explain something that is on your tax return that seems a little off? Well, every year, unfortunately, people do. And what's even worse is a lot of them are simply victims of some of the different scams and frauds and liars out there when it comes to your taxes. So every year, in an effort to help the taxpayer, the IRS issues out its annual Dirty Dozen list. And over the course of the past couple of weeks, lo and behold, out came the list for 2023. In essence, what it does is it lays out various schemes that you, the taxpayer, should watch out for when you're having your return prepared. So on the program today, we're joined by fellow certified financial fiduciary and IRS enrolled agent, Christina Lamb of Nelson Financial Planning. Welcome to the program again.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's been a little while since we've had you on the program. What are you up to?
Yeah, a little busy during tax season.
Little busy during tax season. As you might well imagine, an IRS enrolled agent, very busy during the course of tax season. Well, we're glad the season has ended and we get the pleasure of having you back on the program.
Me too. I'm excited for the summer.
Excellent, excellent. Well, the IRS certainly does a pretty extensive process of reviewing returns each and every year. The reality is that I think most people are under the impression that they can reach out to you in any different ways. The reality is the IRS isn't just going to be texting you or emailing you or calling you right out of the blue.
Absolutely. For the most part, the only communication we have ever seen is always going to be a letter.
Certainly initially, that is how they correspond. So one of the ways in which I think a lot of people just fall prey, and this isn't really even on their Dirty Dozen list for this year, is just this notion of getting a phone call that says, you owe the IRS, you must pay, or else you're going to go to jail or something like that.
Yes, they're coming after you. They're going to throw you away, but no, that is absolutely not accurate. Don't call them. Don't give them any information, certainly.
It's all part of that fraud, and that sort of sets the stage for actually what our topic is going to be next week on the program. We're actually going to have an IT specialist guy by the name of Ron Cervantes on the program next week to talk about all things cybersecurity and how you can protect yourself from the attempt of folks to steal money, approaching almost a $10 trillion annual industry. And it really is an industry that is out there these days. So let's make our way to the list. I guess remember, if one of these sounds familiar to you as a listener of the program, you may want to double check your tax return.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of these repeat from year to year. Some of them you'll see are new or they're add-ons to it. So some may sound familiar from our other prior shows going over.
Yeah, there's certainly some consistency, although there's always some new ones that pop up. And I think this first one that we're going to talk about, the employee retention credit claims, is sort of one of the ones that I would say is on the newer side of the equation.
Yeah, we actually have had a few phone calls coming into the office this year with people questioning this. And this is, you may have heard some radio ads or seen promotions online where they're aggressive pitches to try and get people to apply that have businesses for this employee retention credit.
And this employee retention credit goes back to some of the COVID legislation that passed that said, hey, if you paid your employees during COVID and you stayed open, then and you continue to pay them, then there's a tax credit that's available. So this one is kind of one of those things where I think there's still a lot of money still out there that is unclaimed from COVID.
Correct.
That's kind of ties directly into the conversation that's happening in Washington right now about sort of the budget deadline, if you will.
And what to do with that extra money.
Correct. They're trying to claim that back, and if it's unspent money, let's claim it back and put it towards the bills of the federal government. So interestingly, these things all sort of tie together, but the employee retention credit, I was reading a different article that said that the IRS was literally taking about 90% of its audit agents and reshuffling them to this particular issue because it has become so widespread with all of the advertising and promotion that's being done out there.
Yeah, it's crazy how much that is getting resourced to this, and then also how much I've even personally heard the ads. on the radio and seen them online and things like that. So they're definitely out there. And there's definitely people taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and not to say that if you don't qualify, obviously that's something that you should be taking advantage of. But for the most part, a lot of these ads are geared to folks that don't really make the technical requirements. These folks, what the process involves is it involves going back and amending prior year returns. So
Correct.
You're sort of reopening the can of worms, if you will, with the IRS on a prior year return, which is never
really a good thing.
Right, never really a good idea to say.
You really want to make sure that you qualify for whatever it is if you're amending anything on your return.
Because they're going to take a much, much harder
of
look
course. The whole entire return, not just the item that you're amending. So.
Right. So it opens up the can. That's a fair point. It opens up the can of worms for everything on the return.
Right.
And so these attempts to amend the returns, they'll amend the returns, and then they will take a portion of the credit, and that's that in and of itself. When you have somebody that is preparing your taxes and saying, "Hey, we're going to take a percent of the refund back or the credit back," that's a red flag in and of itself.
Absolutely, I think that kind of hits somewhere else down the line as well. But preparers should never be basing your preparation fee on your refund amount, and that's where you start to get in trouble. And you see the preparers adding fake and miscellaneous things onto your return that you have no idea about.
Well, and here's the real key on all of that. It's not the preparer's ultimate responsibility.
Yes, most folks don't realize when you sign for your return,
right,
you are agreeing to everything that is on that return, and you are responsible and saying that, it's all true and accurate. And most people really don't realize that, but that is the fact. It's sort of a release on the preparer by you signing it.
That's exactly right. So if you go through this process, claim the credit, and say, oh, and the IRS comes and knocks, you say, oh, well, the ABC company, first of all, assuming ABC company is still around by the time the IRS catches up with you, because a lot of these have just sprung up to collect as much money as possible, and then they disappear. The reality is that if you're sitting there with the IRS, they don't really care why you did or what the promotion was or whatever the case may be. Ultimately, it is your responsibility.
Yeah, not only your responsibility, but you are also going to be responsible for paying all the back interest on the amount that you owed. And there's, not really going to be anyone for you to go after anymore because those people know exactly what they're doing. They come and go, as Joel said, and they're no longer there to even try to go back and sue.
Right. Where'd they go? So that's probably one of the biggest ones that is sort of on the newer side of things. This next one is an oldie but a goodie, the whole notion of phishing and smishing and all of that kind of thing. So what's that all about?
So I just kind of wanted to point out the difference between phishing and smishing. I wasn't entirely sure what smishing was, but so phishing is where, somebody is going to send you an email and then they're going to ask you for your personal information through that email. So smishing is the same thing, but it's just when they text you.
Yeah, there's a word for everything. There's a term for everything in this world. That's for sure.
Well, as I was reading through these, I'm like, oh my goodness, my mom calls me every week about a text message she receives from Netflix or Amazon saying that they're canceling her subscription, and she doesn't have any of those accounts, by the way, and she gets, freaked out by it. But, again, here these scammers are trying to steal your personal information. And by filling it out, people think that it's a legitimate thing. Most people these days, with the exception of my mom probably, have an Amazon account or a Netflix account, something where they're trying to obtain that information.
Yeah, no, it's just a constant source of frustration, particularly among folks beyond a certain age where, they constantly get that bombardment on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's just another point where the IRS is never going to communicate with you that way.
Right.
Their initial point of contact is almost always a letter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we got more on this list because there's a whole lot more that taxpayers are getting scammed out there every day. Thanks to the IRS, they've got the Dirty Dozen lists of things for you to watch out for, which is what we're talking about here on the program. We'll continue after these messages here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris and Christina Lamb of Nelson Financial Planning.